Surprise, Matthew. We're going to start the show now. We got to talk about the spring task list for Maryland, USC, Indiana, and Ohio State. But I got to give you my thoughts on Clemson. What are you doing? Did you cut me off?
I was just so excited to talk about Clemson
that must be years of aggression that you have not let out, that you just decided to let out against me right now by cutting me off on the intro. This is a professional organization, people. Felix, Sharpe, Matthew, Bruening for CampusToCanton.com. As I was saying, we're going to do the spring prep task list for Ohio State, Maryland, USC, and Indiana. I want to talk about Clemson, and I want to talk about what seems to be happening at the end of the spring as far as the transfer portal goes. Drop a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel. We really appreciate it. We're trying to get to 4,000 subscribers as soon as we can. I should probably make a video. We should probably talk about Mike from the 40 Chess guys about the future of college fantasy and whether or not Sleeper will ever add it. I've got some firsthand information about that discussion. But before we get to all of that, let's talk about Clemson, Matthew, because Clemson yesterday filed its lawsuit against the ACC, and they filed what's called a declaratory judgment action. I'm a practicing attorney here in Louisville, Kentucky. I have filed declaratory judgment actions. A declaratory judgment action is I'm going to say what it is, and then I'll tell you what Clemson is actually asking for here. A declaratory judgment action is a lawsuit where one party is saying, Judge, we don't want money here. Just call balls and strikes. Tell us who is right. That's what Clemson's asking the court to do here. They filed it in state court in South Carolina. They've got some very powerful attorneys there. One set of attorneys in New York, one in Columbia, South Carolina, and another in Greenville, South Carolina. So that is what a declaratory judgment is. Now, as opposed to a traditional civil litigation where you're actually trying to get money, they're only trying to declare the rights of the parties here between Clemson and the ACC. And what this lawsuit is saying, what Clemson is alleging, is that in this 2013 agreement that all these member institutions in the ACC signed, there is a grant of rights. So when you hear this talking about on ESPN or with Josh Pate or whomever your favorite person is who covers college football, they will be talking about a grant of rights. And what that means is all of the member institutions in the ACC have given permission to the ACC to negotiate their media deals, television deals with ESPN, CBS, whomever, streaming, all of that stuff. And those rights have been under fire. Of course, we saw Florida State file a similar lawsuit against the ACC. And it's funny because these agreements have been signed, and Clemson is essentially saying, oh, by the way, that grant of rights extends through 2036. So a long time. And of course, we got everything going down in college football with the Power 2 conference and conference realignment. Basically, Clemson wants a piece of that, its own piece, whether it be in the Big Ten or the SEC. Same for Florida State. What Clemson is arguing is, hey, court, remember that grant of rights that we signed so that the ACC can negotiate our television rights? Well, that only applies if we are actually in the ACC. It doesn't apply if we're not in the ACC. That's the argument that they're making. The ACC hasn't filed its answer yet. It will. It's going to allege at some point that no, doesn't matter if Clemson is in the ACC or not. We, the ACC, still hold those rights until 2036. That's what they're going to argue. The declaratory judgment action is a legal question. What that means here is that since everybody agrees as to what the facts are, the facts being the contract that all the ACC members signed, there's not going to be a jury trial here. Actually, I don't even think one is requested in the complaint. But there's not going to be a jury trial here. This is a legal question that will be decided by the court. There will be briefs written, probably 25 pages each, or whatever the limit is in this jurisdiction in South Carolina. They'll be filing briefs. Excuse me. And that's it. Now, Chris asked me on Twitter, he said, what do I think the outcome is going to be? I have to actually read the document to interpret it myself. The document was not attached to the complaint. It will be filed on the record. These are public institutions, so it might be, somebody can let me know in the comments, can you find the 2013 ACC agreement online? Is it a public document somewhere? Because I would like to read it. I'm sure that Matthew finds this very intriguing, and he'd like to read the agreement too.
Absolutely.
125 pages or whatever it is.
It's been a fascinating conversation.
We know what this is the ACC, Clemson, Florida State, two of the more powerful schools in that conference, are trying to get their cut of the pie when it comes to conference realignment. All of these other schools are being able to negotiate their power with these networks by joining in the Super 2 conference. Clemson and Florida State want their shot at that too. Now, the other thing that they're asking for in this complaint is, Judge, can you tell us that the buyout that we negotiated, that's unfair and unconscionable? The buyout is $140 million that they agreed to, that Clemson agreed to, that all these schools agreed to. They want the court to determine that the buyout, the withdrawal penalty, is unfair. So that's it. Class, are there any questions on Clemson's lawsuit? Matthew?
What do you think happens with Clemson? Do you think they get out of it? Do you think that the court calls strike or ball?
I would need to read the document itself. However, it's a very clever argument. It's a clever argument to make. All of these agreements were reviewed by their own attorneys before this document was signed. These are both sophisticated entities with equal bargaining power. But the lawsuit was filed in South Carolina. The ACC is based where? North Carolina. It's the good guy in this. Clemson has home field advantage here with its judge. That's just true. So I don't. If we had a decision in the Florida State case, I would be able to tell you, this is what I think. If I had the document, I would tell you this is how I think it's going to play out. I think that they pass these rights on for them to extend through 2036. I don't see how they get out of it. But Clemson has home field advantage. Do I think that Clemson and FSU are a package deal? No, I don't. I think that actually one of them will go to the ACC or the SEC, and one of them will go to the Big Ten. I don't think that they're both going to the same conference Thank you, Luke. Thank you, Luke, for joining the chat. You can join the chat too. You can like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We are pushing the Campus to Canton fantasy format that involves both college and NFL players. You got a whole college roster, and you play college fantasy football during the college season. And when your players declare for the NFL draft, they're added to your NFL roster. That's what we're doing around here. Matthew, did you have anything to add on Clemson, or can I go here to we're hearing about Alabama?
Let's talk about Alabama. That's an interesting school with interesting things going on.
Okay. And you can help me carry the show if you want to.
If you'd like my legalese on this, I'd love to give it.
I didn't use legalese. I just said this is what's happening.
Sounds like a lot of big things are going down for Clemson and FSU, and I think eventually at some point they're gonna probably figure this out with all the hours being billed to those very expensive lawyers.
They are very expensive law firms. I would bet you that the billable rate.
Based on my legal background, which is like purely just watching suits, I would say that Florida State and Clemson are going to win because they're the good guys. I think that they've got Harvey and Mike on their side, and they're going to figure out a way to get through. So that's just my.
I've never seen Suits. I've never seen Suits, but we've had this conversation behind the scenes. What character am I in Suits?
I mean, I think you believe you're Harvey. I think you're more Lewis Litt, but the instigator, the
I
one
don't know
who
what
wants
that
to cause
means.
problems, you wouldn't like it if you watch Suits. But I think
Oh,
you
I'm gonna go
fit
watch it now.
Lewis Litt. No, I mean, his escapades outside the courtroom. You seem like a person who would enjoy mudding and
You're saying I have
gallivanting about
escapades?
time. I do. Yeah.
All right, let's move on here to Alabama. So I think by now everyone has heard that Caden Proctor, who was with Alabama, the freshman tackle on Alabama's team last year, from Iowa, he entered the transfer portal, committed to Iowa. Well, reportedly he's going to enter the transfer portal again with the likelihood that he ends up back at Alabama. On the other hand, Caleb Downs, who also transferred from Alabama to Ohio State, he apparently has taken his all mentions of Ohio State off of his social media. Yeah. Matthew.
Yes.
I told you, let me calm down a little bit. I told you 2 years ago or 3 years ago, whenever NIL was implemented, I said, this is going to be the sport that most closely aligns with American values. Freedom, self-determination, capitalism. I told you, this is the argument that I made. We have no idea what Patrick Mahomes is worth on an open market because there is a salary cap in the NFL. There is no salary cap in college football. Not only that, but the freedom of movement. It's insane.
Yeah.
It's insane. Just imagine who's the free agent that actually just signed, like Saquon Barkley. Imagine if Saquon Barkley was just like, you know what, Eagles, I'm going back to New York because. This is the American ideal. College football. It is the sport that most closely aligns with American ideals. Every other sport has a salary cap. College football does not have a salary cap. The NFL does. The MLB does, even though it doesn't really play. The NBA does. You can pay Caden Proctor and Caleb Downs or Arch Manning whatever you want to, whatever you can pull out of your pocket. They earned it. College football is the American sport, Matthew, and I know you agree.
I mean, I do. I don't think any of us disagreed with you.
Okay, you're doing a terrible job. Helping me out here.
The argument, I believe, I know Austin and me were on the same side of this one, was more of like we weren't going to see anybody getting like double-digit NIL deals because Nico got that $7 million, you and Chris said like 10 mils right down the pipe, and that didn't happen. But I think that overall, there isn't technically a salary cap on college football, but I do think that what's the word I'm looking for here? When people work together behind the scenes and they're not supposed to. What's the word?
Collusion.
There we go. Collusion.
Antitrust.
I think there is a little bit of collusion in the fact that we have heard coaches come out and say, a quarterback cost $1 million or $2 million in the transfer portal. I don't think that we will see anybody go out of their way to spend a ton of money. But yeah, I mean, I think if freedom of movement is going to
not right now.
Well, I think it's going to change.
We get 15, 20 years down the road, those prices are going to continue to go up, just like they do in the NFL, just like the salary cap increases, just like you get a 3% raise each year for work. The quarterback this year that costs $2 million a year, 4 or 5 years from now is going to cost 8, 9, 10. That's just going to be the reality of the situation.
Maybe.
You seen these inflation statistics? $2 million 5 years from now is not going to be $2 million.
All I know is at some point there's going to be a commissioner of college football, and it's going to be the Super 2 or whatever, 3 or 4 conferences, and I guarantee you there will be some sort of salary cap on the sport, whether you like it or not. It's coming. It's going to happen. They're already out there asking for it. So I think it's going to come, which is why yes, we will see the prices increase as like you said, as you mentioned, we see it in NFL, baseball, every sport.
I don't have a problem with that because if there is a salary cap in college football, you know what else is going to come? Health benefits, medical care, retirement benefits, 401ks. Those students are going salaries. Those students are going to be getting those in exchange.
We hope.
Those benefits in exchange. Okay. So we have been talking about the pre-spring task list or checklist. Somebody should have came up with another name for this series. For teams. We covered the SEC a couple of weeks ago, over 4 weeks, and now we're covering the Big Ten. This is the second part of this series. We're doing Maryland, Ohio State, USC, and Indiana today. Let's start with Maryland. Maryland, Mike Locksley is still the head coach. Josh Gaddis and Kevin Sumlin are still your offensive coordinator and co-offensive coordinator. The funny thing is when Josh Gaddis left Michigan and went to Miami, who was the program that panned this hiring like immediately? We were.
Yeah.
We were. And now, I think actually Talia Tagovailoa may have arguably regressed over the years under Josh Gaddis. Arguably. I mean, he kind of, his first year as a starter, 3 years ago? 4 years ago? I'm losing track of time. He looked like he was a player that had some promise and just never really made additional strides. So they lose Talia Tagovailoa. They lose Ramon Brown, who was a favorite of some here at the company. They lose Corey Dyches. Matthew, for those who are playing in Campus to Canton leagues, you should be familiar with Corey Dyches because he is absolutely a wide receiver, but he has tight end eligibility. He entered the transfer portal. It was a very good. Because of that, you put him in your tight end slot and he gets wide receiver statistics, at least when he was healthy. He entered the transfer portal, but he hasn't signed yet. Yeah. He hasn't signed anywhere. Now, I saw an article talking about Texas would be a good place for him to land, but they got Amari Niblack there. It really is a wide receiver. I want to see him land somewhere because I have him rostered in a lot of places because, those players like Corey Dyches, at Maryland, Dalvin Smith at Western Kentucky. Who else? Not Trent Penix. There's a freshman at NC State whose name is escaping me, who's one of these wide receivers with tight end eligibility. These players you got to know in campus to Canton leagues and in your college fantasy leagues. Corey Dyches was one of those guys. Hasn't signed with a team, but one of my favorites, Matthew, Antoine Littleton. Yeah. There's nothing little about Antoine Littleton, 6'1", 230 pounds. I like the Ramondre Stevenson spectrum of player. That's where Antoine Littleton exists. He was behind Roman Hemby last year. He is transferred to Temple. I'm very interested to see how he does next year. I just like those. I like athleticism at that size. And Antoine Littleton has, he's okay. He's okay. He's not Ramondre Stevenson as far as his feet, but he's a big boy who can move. We got to watch that Philadelphia team there in Temple. But, of course, the big – excuse me. I've been coughing. And Dynasty Coach 8 is in the chat. He has foreshadowed this. The big acquisition for Maryland this year is NC State quarterback MJ Morris, who obviously did not seem to mesh with Robert Anae at NC State. And so now he's with Maryland and Mike Locksley. We had him as a consensus, top 30-ish quarterback, even behind Brennan Armstrong last year for NC State. Matthew, do you have an opinion on whether or not he still deserves to be in that top 25-ish? And I'll tell you what, the reason I asked this question is because Billy Edwards Jr., who was Talia Tagovailoa's backup, he has shown – now, not last year. Last year, he only completed 30% of his passes. The year before that, he showed some flashes, including against Michigan at Michigan towards the end of that game coming in for Talia. I think Billy Edwards Jr. has a very strong arm. He's mobile. I like some of the tools. I don't think it's a given that MJ Morris gets this job.
Yeah, I think it's probably leaning toward MJ Morris. I think that's why he ends up transferring here. Do I think he deserves to be in the top 25? I'm pulling up my rankings because I know he's not in the top 25. I'm trying to see where I have him, and I'm scrolling, and I don't see him at the moment. So I would find it very hard to think that he's going to be successful in this offense. I don't really like any of the receiving core. Don't like the offense in general. I was trying to pull up how good this offense has been. I mean, they passed 45% of the time in neutral game script situations, had a 1.5 explosiveness. I mean, okay, so they passed more than the average coach, but they were pretty behind on the average coach in pass explosiveness. Pass success rate was not good as well. It was only at about a 45%. Like, I don't think that MJ Morris coming in here with a poor wide receiver core is really going to increase. Like, maybe, I guess, if he runs a little bit, he'll be fine. But like fantasy wise, I think
he can run. I mean, he is considered a dual threat.
Yeah.
I'm mindful of the fact that some of the people who are listening might not be familiar with some of these players, and I can't think of a good comp for MJ Morris. For Billy Edwards Jr., I would compare him to like Taylor Heineke type player, like a guy who's going to be a backup, who your city might be cheering for him to get on the field if the starter doesn't perform well. That's who I think Billy Edwards Jr. is. I don't really have a good comp for MJ Morris, even though he's like a dual threat guy.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of who I would compare him to, and there's nobody coming to mind.
Let's all be quiet until you figure it out.
What about Dustin Crum from Kent
Dustin
State?
Crum. Do you? Nobody gets that.
Nobody has any idea who that is.
Nobody gets.
No, I have no idea.
Okay.
I mean,
he's a dual threat. He can do a little bit of everything. Sorry, we don't have a better.
He's got a decent arm, but again, he's going up.
Yeah.
I haven't looked at Maryland's schedule, but he's going to be going up against a lot of very good defenses in the Big Ten. Like, I just don't see him being fantasy viable, and I don't see him. I don't think he's got the tool set to be an NFL quarterback, if I'm being honest. So I don't know. He's not a top 25.
I mean, he showed promise early
and find him, but
yeah, his growth was kind of stunted by being there with an offensive coordinator that didn't recruit him last year. So that's part of the issue. I think he's from the Florida area, if I remember correctly. If you have a comp for MJ Morris in the chat, please let us know. All right, as far as freshmen go.
Dynasty Coach A, who's your comp for MJ Morris? Since it's MJ Morris to the moon. He's going to hit us with like Russell Wilson. Just you watch.
No.
You watch. She's going to hit us with someone ridiculous.
I've been coughing all night, and I'm coughing into the microphone. I'm better.
I'm having all kinds of issues with my mouse.
We're playing hurt.
Yeah, we're playing. It's our Jordan flu game tonight. It's not pretty. What did I tell you? I know these things. I told you he was going to say Russell Wilson. I don't see it. I'm just letting you know. I know how the man thinks.
You know who reminds me? So you know who reminds me of Russell Wilson? This is like, I'm being serious here.
Oh, is it's going to be
Rocco Becht from Iowa State. What? Why do you immediately reject that premise?
Teach
the similar size. I think they have similar play styles. Rocco Becht reminds me of late stage Russell Wilson, like not early Russell Wilson running all around.
Never mind. I'm just gonna let it go. You and Iowa State quarterbacks is like me and
time out. The other Iowa State quarterback that I touted got in trouble for a gambling thing. We don't even know
he wasn't good before that either, though. No, he was
Hunter Deckers. Hunter Deckers is who we're talking about.
The hefty lefty was not that good before the gambling. I think that's why he went into gambling, because he knew he had no future in college.
You're a certified NFL. Let's get back to Maryland here. Yes. They've got freshman Kristen Martin, who is a quarterback. He's in our Tier 3 in the freshman guide, which you can get, by the way, at campusdecanton.com for $19.99. And 4-star running back Dejon Williams. We did not write a profile on Dejon Williams. He's a 4-star. I don't know why we didn't write him up, but obviously Roman Hemby is going to be the running back there. He's returning, but be on the lookout if you want a Maryland running back. Dejon Williams is there. So we're talking about questions heading into the spring. For this team, I think it's for it to be Maryland. Mike Locksley recruited at damn near an elite level the last couple of years, but this 2024 class has been the worst class that they've had in the last 5 years or so. I mean, even think about Maryland was one of the finalists for Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams being from that tri-state area too. They got Mike Locksley had Chop Robinson. I mean, this is a guy from Maryland. He's recruiting at an elite level. And they just didn't recruit that way this year. So, stock down for Maryland football as far as recruiting goes is probably as it goes overall. The only thing I'm looking at on this team as far as campus to Canton leagues go are Billy Edwards Jr. versus MJ Morris. And is Roman Hemby a well-rounded player who can be, potentially a CFF asset or even a late-round NFL pick? I can't think of something else I care about on this team. So,
no, yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I'd love to see a wide receiver break out here. Raheem Jarrett, who is it? Raheem Jarrett, not Stephon, DJ Moore. Probably the last two.
DJ Moore's playing for Maryland now.
Didn't he play for Maryland?
Raheem Jarrett, DJ Moore, and Stephon Diggs.
What's Stephon Diggs? I thought so. That's it. They have had some wide receivers coming. Now, Raheem Jarrett didn't really do it in the NFL, and honestly didn't really do it.
I thought you were saying DJ Moore had some eligibility that we just
No. I was trying to remember the wide
he's not going
to
play for the Bears. He's going to go back to
I wouldn't either. They think Caleb's going to solve their problems. Got rid of Justin Fields, but that's not what we're here to talk about right now. I'd love to see another wide receiver come out of here. I just don't really like anybody on this roster. I don't, like I said, I don't trust the offense and, the new Russell Wilson of college football, MJ Morris, to get the best out of him either. So,
okay.
Maybe Mike Mallory's guy, Caden Prather, maybe he finally breaks out after his 6 years.
No, I mean, this team, I think that Corey Dyches was the pass catcher that I was most excited about last year. He's not there. There's not a pass catcher on this team that I'm excited about in 2024.
Yeah. I'm with you.
So, do you want to lead the discussion on USC?
Yeah, USC.
The Big Ten. We just talked about Maryland, and now we're talking about USC in the Big Ten. That's how crazy the Big Ten is.
Newcomers to the Big Ten, and I think it's going to be a rough year for them. So they didn't make any real changes on the offensive side of things. Obviously, a bunch of changes on the defensive side, which was much needed as we've seen what happened with USC's defense over the past couple of years. Caleb Williams, Austin Jones, Marshawn Lloyd, Taj Washington, and Brendan Rice all go to the NFL. They lose Dorian Singer, heralded Dorian Singer, who I believe was supposed to be like the best wide receiver since Jerry Rice in college football last year. Did not work out. He transfers to Utah. Malachi Nelson, a quarterback we all loved. Obviously, we did a video about that when it happened, the news breaking about him transferring to Boise State. Your boy, Mario Williams, transfers to Tulane. Collins guy, Michael Jackson III, transfers to Georgia, and Raleek Brown goes to Arizona State. The key additions, Jaden, I always mess up his last name. Is it Miava? The kind of exciting true freshman quarterback out of UNLV last year transfers in here after we thought he was going to Georgia, ends up backing out from that, and now coming over here to back up Miller Moss. Jaquavius Marks comes over from Mississippi State, the running back, and honestly, there's not really anything to talk about in this freshman class. They did add a 4-star wide receiver, but none of these guys I think really matter. 20th ranked class overall, not a great year for Lincoln Riley recruiting-wise. I have a question for you on this. We talk about the holes, right? The holes on this team. Is it fair to say that the entire offense is a hole right now for USC? Who do you trust?
No.
Is it Zachariah Branch?
Zachariah Branch. I like Deuce Robinson. I'm a big fan of Deuce Robinson. We liked the freshman running backs last year between Joyner and Peterson.
Yeah.
They add Jaquavius Marks. I mean, it's a Lincoln Riley team. I don't think that offense is going to be necessarily a problem for him. Now, it is the Big Ten. Corey Pierre, I've never known how to say Corey's last name, but he just tweeted that somebody is running ahead of Deuce Robinson.
Not surprising.
In spring. By the way, Deuce Robinson, Mike Evans, very easy comp there. But there's another player that is allegedly running ahead of Deuce Robinson. Deuce Robinson, who also plays baseball at USC, by the way. Yeah. What was the question? Do I think that there's going to be a problem on the offense, on a Lincoln Riley offense?
Yes, there is going to be one. But go ahead.
I haven't seen enough. We've seen one game of Miller Moss. I can't make a whole bunch of conclusions based on a bowl game.
I think we're in for a ton of trouble with USC's offense, if you want me to be honest. I get that it's Lincoln Riley, argue one of the best offensive minds in the country. I think he does a great job in creating routes that create separation for his wide receivers. Go back to look at like the year CeeDee Lamb was there and just how wide open he was at times. Now, granted, CeeDee Lamb, incredible route runner as well. But he's going up against some of the, again, better defenses in the country. Okay, you're right, Kings of North. When has Lincoln Riley not been okay on offense? When has Lincoln Riley not had a good quarterback? Oh, yeah, 2024.
Boy, I love it when you respond to comments and don't say what the comment was, because
Kings of North. I did. Really, I actually did. You weren't listening to me. I said, you're right, Kings of North. When has Lincoln Riley not been okay on offense? That's what I said. And I replied with, when has he not had a good quarterback? He's always had a highly touted quarterback. I'm sorry, I did not think Miller Moss's performance. I get he set the Liberty Bowl game record or whatever bowl game they were in, Auto Zone Sunshine Bowl. I don't care. It was a really bad, I'm pretty sure they played Louisville, if I'm remembering correctly. A Louisville team that, yes, was ranked very highly defensively, was missing a bunch of players on defense. I do not think that Miller Moss is going to be able to go out there and sling it in any sort of way. I don't like their receiving weapons. We just talked about how Corey mentioned that someone's running ahead of Deuce Robinson right now. It's Zachariah Branch, and that's it. We haven't even seen anything from Mekhi Lemon. They wanted to play him at defensive back last year. You're talking about the running backs. I get it. I actually kind of like Peterson, but they bring in Jaquavius Marks, which tell me they didn't like Joyner.
You didn't even talk about Joint. Okay.
I just brought him up.
My bad.
They clearly didn't love him either one of those that much if they're bringing in Jaquavius Marks, who's also not that good of a running back in my opinion. So now you've got a three-headed backfield. That offensive line is still not good, and they're going up against some of the best defensive lines in the country on top of having to fly back and forth all over the country. Like, Lincoln Riley's going to be fine when they play Indiana, but when they play Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon, they're going to get blitzed. They're probably going to be run off the field, and I think there's going to be a lot of questions about Lincoln Riley in this offense. I think USC is in for a world of hurt this year, personally.
Well, so if you look at the C2C winning edge statistics, they are 106 in returning production in the country out of 134 FBS teams. There is a lot to replace on this team. They lose Brennan Rice. They lose Dorian Singer. They lose Mario Williams. They lose Michael Jackson. I can't believe Michael Jackson is still in college.
Yeah,
this has to be his sixth year. But they lose a lot. But the guys that they had behind those guys were very highly touted freshmen that we just haven't seen on the field yet. The aforementioned Deuce Robinson, the aforementioned Mekhi Lemon playing in the slot, the aforementioned Zachariah Branch, who's simply, electric. They're 106 in returning production, but that was a good pass catching class. We don't know if those guys are going to turn out to be, the stars or not, but they were very highly touted, and I like a lot of those guys. By the way, please, would somebody please tell me in the comments who is it that's running ahead of Deuce Robinson with the first team? I'd really appreciate that.
So Kings of North said real quick, looked fine. Riley would have got a transfer if he was concerned. He tried to get a transfer. He tried to flip DJ Lagway on recruiting day. So let's not pretend that he wasn't trying to bring in someone over Miller Moss. We were saying the same thing. Look, I'm going to take some strays here, and that's fine. It is what it is. I love Kyle McCord. We're saying the same crap about Ryan Day last year. It was like, well, if Kyle wasn't it, they had done something. That offense was not the same last year. I completely understand believing in Lincoln Riley and what he's done because his track record speaks for itself. But you also have to have Jacoby Lane, Chris K said, is running ahead of Deuce Robinson. You also have to have the players to do it. Like, legitimately, I pulled up their schedule. LSU in Vegas, that's a loss. And LSU does not have a good defense. LSU is going to beat USC opening week. Again, we have such a great opening week in college football this year. They should beat Utah State. Then they get Michigan at the Big House. That's a loss. Then Wisconsin. I'll give USC 3. I don't think it's that safe to say USC beats Wisconsin. Minnesota, they probably win. Then they get Penn State. That's another loss. Maryland, they probably win. Rutgers, they probably win. At Washington, I'm iffy. Washington lost a lot, but I think that'll be a close game. At Nebraska, at UCLA, and then at Notre Dame. They're probably losing to Notre Dame. That's 4 losses right there, assuming they don't mess up anywhere else on that schedule. I do not think we're going to be seeing the same USC, and I think everybody's putting way too much faith in Lincoln Riley because he's Lincoln Riley.
feel like a lot of these teams are going through transition periods, including USC, but a lot of the teams that you've named have lost. Yeah, so I don't know how you can say, like, even the game at Michigan, that's just a loss. You got a new head coach. You got a lot of new players. I mean, I don't know that that's just a straight up L
Felix,
that you would just write down.
Felix, that defense couldn't have stopped me running through them last year. They're going to stop Alex Orji?
Michigan score? Okay, can USC score 32?
No.
Can Michigan score?
They won't need
that
to.
much. Can they score?
Michigan
30?
will win. It's going to be a 24-17 game. Michigan's going to win. Book it.
We don't even know the projected quarterback for Michigan threw one pass last year.
And he doesn't need to. Have you seen USC try and tackle? Alex Orji and Donovan Edwards will run all over them again.
Okay. I mean, that might be true.
Hey, as Dynasty Coach A mentioned, you know what? There's probably a loss to Maryland with Russell Wilson back to throwing the ball for the Terrapins. You know, there we go. That's another loss for USC.
If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and like the video. When you support us, you support college fantasy football and making it, bringing it to the mainstream. So we appreciate your support there. Let's go here to Indiana. Indiana went through a lot of changes. They hired Kirk Cignetti. They should have hired Chuck Martin out of Miami of Ohio. They go get Kirk Cignetti from James Madison. Do you know who Indiana's offensive coordinator is?
I mean, I do because I looked at the sheet, but go ahead.
It's Mike Shanahan. The audience doesn't know. It's Mike Shanahan, who was with Kirk Cignetti at James Madison. He doesn't have any relationship to the Shanahans, but or at least I don't know. I don't know if he does or not.
We'll find out.
So he's the offensive coordinator. So Indiana loses Cam Camper, who some people like. Cam Camper's a wide receiver. Cam Camper, who's now at Boise State. They also lose Brennan Sorsby to Cincinnati. Excuse me. I think that I'm a fan of Brennan Sorsby, who can do a little bit of everything. He's got a little bit of an awkward runner, but he's a willing runner. There is a quarterback. Speaking of comps, there was a quarterback who backed up Matthew Stafford for a long time for the Lions, named like Shane something. And that's who Brennan Sorsby reminds me of. I'm sorry I don't have a better comp than that, but that is who he reminds me of. Matt, when you're talking, I'll probably look it up to see who it actually is. They bring in Curtis Rourke from Ohio. We had a lot of expectations for Ohio's last year as far as college fantasy goes. Those expectations were not met. Curtis Rourke was hurt for a big part of the season. He's now at Indiana. I also like the freshman quarterback Tyler Cherry, who is a 4-star quarterback who, to me, exists on the Drew Aller spectrum. So one of the things that we liked about Drew Aller coming in to Penn State was his ability to improvise at that size that, Drew Aller's like 6'5", 220 or something like that, if I remember correctly. Tyler Cherry, similar size, but 207, but can move the same way. Now, the thing that separated Drew Aller, in my opinion, was some of these ridiculous anticipatory throws where he's throwing into really tight windows. I don't see that from Tyler Cherry, but the weird ability to move really fluidly at that size really impressed me. He is a 4-star quarterback. He went to the same high school as Taven Jackson, who's competing for the starting job this year with Curtis Rourke. So I would be on the lookout for Tyler Cherry. I would put a star next to his name, put him on the watch list. I don't know that he's necessarily my this year's Thomas Castellanos from then UCF or Cal Swanson from Illinois, but I do like Tyler Cherry, his skill set quite a bit. Kirk Cignetti brought a lot of transfers in. I think they had the 28th ranked transfer class. A lot of those players coming in from James Madison, including wide receiver Elijah Surratt, 6'2", 207, who had 1,100 yards last year at James Madison. When we're looking at what this offense is going to look like, I mean, 6'2", 207 wide receiver. I don't know. I wish Chris was here because he would tell you if this guy was actually a good player. I don't know. I bet you Chris K knows there in the chat. He can tell you if he's actually a legitimate player moving up here to Indiana. But he is somebody that I'm going to be watching, and I'm going to have to go. He's somebody that I think that we should probably consider in freshman and supplemental drafts. And I need to figure out if he is an NFL player. But he has NFL size. I mean, that's 6'2", 207. That's ideal size, 1,100 yards last year. So that's what I'm looking at for Indiana and the fact that they didn't hire my coach. They should have hired Chuck Martin, who has coached Indiana before. So,
I agree. Should have. Yeah. Tyler Cherry is going to be interesting. Doesn't have the rushing upside that Drew Allar has, though. I don't think. He's not quite.
Let me just give you a compliment. You have been so helpful today.
Thank you.
With your commentary.
I appreciate it.
Excellent.
You've
added so much context and color, and when I pass you the ball, you just slam it.
I know. Jerome Bettis rips right at the. I'm the bus. I'm just going right into the end zone. It's been seamless the entire show. No, yeah, I think you mentioned Tyler Cherry. He's the only player on this team that I'm paying attention to. I do think that he has a chance to take over, possibly even this year, because Curtis Rourke has struggled with injuries his entire career. I would not be surprised if he gets a little bit beat up. You think Taven Jackson goes in ahead of him?
I mean, he's got 2 upperclassmen in front of him. He's not starting this year.
I know. He could start at some point in time. You said the same thing about other freshman quarterbacks, and they ended up making it in. You never know. Curtis Rourke, injury prone. I'll remember this. Screenshot your face right there when Tyler Cherry ends up coming in. We'll tweet that out. Matt Bruening, right again, as usual.
Did we do a good job of painting who Tyler Cherry is? Because I know that nobody has watched him.
I mean, if they know who Drew Allar is, I actually think he's closer to like Will Levis, especially because of, his arm, very strong arm. But I don't think that he necessarily knows when not to throw at that speed. I think he's got poor ball. I personally think he's got poor ball placement at times. Like he can use his legs, but he's not nearly as mobile, I think, as Will Levis or Drew Allar are. But I was going to pull up his velo, but I didn't get a chance to do it. I think he has one of the strongest arms in the class, can challenge all 3
Yeah, I think he does too. I think we've measured him objectively quite high. I don't think Indiana has had this type of quarterback recruit, not including Michael Penix Jr., since like Donovan McCulley. Now, you got to remember, Donovan McCulley is playing wide receiver at Indiana now, but he was a very exciting quarterback recruit when he came in. So dual threat quarterback recruit. Okay.
Yeah, good
I will let you go on to we've covered Indiana. Go ahead and do your beloved Ohio State Buckeyes.
Oh, are we talking about the Buckeyes now? Okay, cool. All right, so obviously the main change here is Chip Kelly coming in as offensive coordinator, demoting Brian Hartline / honestly Ryan Day, who was calling plays all last year, even though Brian Hartline was offensive coordinator in name and money wise only. Key departures: Chip Trayanum goes to Kentucky, Julian Fleming to Penn State, Evan Pryor, the kind of intriguing running back, heads back home to Cincinnati, Kyle McCord to Syracuse, and Marvin Harrison Jr. goes to the NFL. Transfers in: Quinshon Judkins comes over from Ole Miss. Julian Sand, although technically a freshman, did transfer in from Alabama, as did their center Seth McLaughlin. Will Howard from Kansas State transfers in at quarterback, and as of now, in my opinion, the best player in all of college football, Caleb Downs, is technically still on Ohio State's roster as of now, transferred in from Alabama. We will see if that sticks. The highly touted freshman, Jeremiah Smith, who is just an absolute freaking game changer, who I'm sure we'll talk about here in a minute. The number 1 player in the entire class, I should mention, not just the number 1 wide receiver, the number 1 player in the entire 2024 recruiting class. Mylan Graham, a very good wide receiver as well. James Peoples, running back, and Air Noland at quarterback. The lefty comes in. To me, the biggest holes on this team are, which is going to be insane to say, I honestly think it's wide receiver, which is not something we've ever really talked about at Ohio State, at least not since we've done this show. We've had, very famously, one of our other biggest debates has been, who is going to be the best wide receiver out of G. Scott Jr., Julian Fleming, and JSN, which was kind of one of the very first shows we ever did, actually. But also quarterback. I know Mike Valerie and Corey Pereira are Devy guys, incredible Devy minds, incredible football minds. Love Walker.
Can I just jump in there on the what that there was that 2020 class of G. Scott, Mookie Cooper.
Yeah.
Julian Fleming and Jackson Smith and Jigba at Ohio State.
Yeah.
Just a loaded wide receiver core. And then 2 years later, Alabama had a Guy Hall.
Yeah.
Who am I missing? JoJo Earl and
Christian
Ja'Cory Brooks. Ja'Cory Brooks and Christian Leary, all in, the top 3 all in like the top 8 of the wide receiver class. The 24/7. I mean, get it together with your wide receiver rankings. Yeah. That's a harder position to scout than quarterback sometimes.
Yeah.
This wide receiver. Because some of these wide receivers fall flat on their face.
Anyway. Wasn't pretty well, I still think G. Scott had a lot of talent had he not moved to tight end, but that's a discussion for another time. I know how much that kind of gets under your skin.
What's funny is that when Marvin Harrison Jr. came in as a freshman, I'm like, oh, he reminds me of G. Scott. Yeah. That's what he reminds me of. Yeah.
Yeah. Good thing Marvin Harrison Jr. wasn't convinced to move to tight end, or we would have been robbed one of the best wide receivers of all time. So I think it's really the wide receiver production and quarterback, and that's a big thing for a Ryan Day-led Ohio State team. I mean, at wide receiver, I get that they brought Mecca back, but he's not the Garrett Wilson's I'm trying to think of, for the life of me, cannot remember who was before Garrett Wilson now. But he's not the Marvin Harrison, the Garrett Wilson type. Like, I don't think he's your number one wide receiver in the offense. I don't think it's going to be Carnell Tate. I know it's funny. All last year I talked about you guys were overblowing Carnell Tate. Now Austin and them are coming back and bringing him back a little bit. Maybe he wasn't as great as we thought he was.
He's a 21st percentile athlete. He's not a great guy. He's one of those, I don't know, like has additional redeeming qualities, not necessarily his athleticism.
Yeah, I mean, we had hoped with the kind of athlete, at least he was in high school, and Brandon Ennis was going to be able to do something year 1-0. You know, again, I still think he might do something in college, but statistically it's shown with what Austin and Chris have done with it that it probably is not going to pan out to the NFL. I mean, it's a really poor room. And then on top of that, you bring in that they brought in Will Howard, who, again, I know, as I was going to say, Mike and Corey are very high on, but the reports have not been glowing at all. And I'm going to add in, like, I get that he has rushing upside.
Devin Brown, let's go, baby. Run it back.
When's the last time that Chip Kelly had a passing threat quarterback that was good? I'm not talking fantasy, because the dude's killed it with fantasy quarterbacks. Let me know the last quarterback he had that was actually good at passing the ball in like an actual offense.
Like Mark Sanchez.
Was he the Mark coach?
Sanchez there
was
with
he the
in
USC?
The Eagles? No,
I was talking about in college. I don't know. No. All I know of Mark Sanchez was the butt fumble. I really don't remember him being a good passer. I'm actually pretty sure he was horrible, but he was able to take the very good Jets defenses to multiple playoffs because of Darrelle Revis and everybody else there. He hasn't had one. That's the thing there. He hasn't. I mean, let me ask you a question, Felix. I'm gonna throw this one to you. You know, I'm gonna set you up here. Dante Moore or Will Howard? Who are you taking? Who's got the better skill set?
I mean, Dante Moore is ranked way ahead of Will Howard in my rankings.
And look at how bad he made that guy look last year. I just don't think this is going to work.
I disagree on Dante Moore looking bad last year at UCLA. I think that he made a lot of freshman mistakes, and Chip Kelly should have stayed with him. I disagree that Dante Moore.
I agree with that part, but I just don't think that this offense, the way that Chip Kelly wants to run this offense, I don't think it's going to work. And I would not be surprised if by like midseason, we're not seeing Ryan Day holding the play sheet again and talking into his headset because he's actually calling the plays. I just don't think it's going to work. I think that they're going to lean heavily on TreVeyon Henderson and Judkins. I think Will Howard's going to be a bust, if you want me to be honest, which is also going to hurt these wide receivers. Like no, Michigan's not going to. It's going to be Oregon. I think it's going to end up being the class of the Big Ten. And if Ohio State somehow holds on to Caleb Downs, which it sounds like may not actually happen, like maybe they win on their defense again, because I think, again, he's the best player in all of college football. But I just am extremely worried about this team and this offense this year. Because, again, you look at the stats.
You didn't even answer the main question that's in the title of this episode. Before you get to that question.
What's that?
In 2000,
let me finish my statement. Let me finish my statement because I'm on a roll here.
Okay.
I'm on a roll here. Kyle McCord's stats have been better than Will Howard their entire college career, and you guys all hated on Kyle McCord. Will Howard's not going to be any better. Go ahead. So what happened in 2010?
2015 for the Philadelphia Eagles. Sam Bradford actually had 3,700 yards passing for Chip Kelly, 19 touchdowns and 14 interceptions. I mean, Sam Bradford had no rushing ability at all. And that's a decent season for Sam Bradford with the Eagles. The question, did I miss you talk about whether or not Quinshon or TreVeyon is going to be the engine for this offense, or it's going to be both?
No.
That's the title question.
I said that they're going to lean heavily on them. I think it's going to end up being Judkins, personally. I just think he's a better in-between-the-tackles runner. I think TreVeyon Henderson is the better overall running back, but Judkins is the better runner in between the tackles. I think they rely heavier on on him, use Henderson to kind of come in and be the change of pace back, the receiving back, kind of like what they did to start off his freshman season when they were using Mayan Williams in that role, and Henderson kind of came in but then took over. I just don't think he takes over from Judkins. I think Judkins is going to be the guy.
Over under 29.5 pass attempts per game on the season for Ohio State starting quarterback.
Per game? Well, I need to look at their schedule, because if they play like Kent State and Utah State like multiple times, it'll probably go over. But let's see here really quick. Oh, great. They start off the season with Akron. I mean, they're right there alone. Michigan State, Iowa, Oregon, Penn State, Nebraska. I'm going to say under. I think he's going to be in the 25 to 27 range.
I think the strength of this team is obviously the running back position and using your running quarterback. And I just don't know. They wouldn't bring Chip Kelly in for anything other than running the football, right?
I
mean, they want to beat Michigan. They want to be more physical than Michigan. I don't know that Chip Kelly is necessarily associated with physicality, but he is associated with running the ball. So,
yeah, I mean, I don't think it's going to work. I think they beat Michigan. Michigan's taking a step back this year with everybody they lost, but
okay. Is there anything else?
Nope. I was trying to see how many attempts Kyle McCord had a game here really quick. 29. That was a great call in 29.5. Did you look that up beforehand, and that's why you said that?
No, I didn't. I didn't. Sean Hill is the quarterback that I was looking for to compare. I forget who I was talking about earlier. Sean Hill is the name I was looking for.
Oh, wait. We haven't really talked about the post-transfer candidates on any of these teams, but you mentioned Devin Brown. I think there's a realistic shot that he enters the transfer portal after the spring. I think there's a chance Lincoln Kineholz does as well, and there's a chance I think Aaron Nolan does as well. Main event asked him.
Yeah, Aaron Nolan, absolutely.
Main event asked, am I late but Julian Sayin season? I don't know what to think about Sayin. I think he is going to be the next guy up, but as I've talked about before, everybody's got to remember he was a Bill O'Brien guy. Bill O'Brien started recruiting him at Alabama before he ended up leaving and going into the NFL. He was the first guy to kind of like reach out to Julian Sayin. From everything I was told, he was a big reason why Julian Sayin ended up coming to Ohio State and then a week later left and goes to Boston College. Not saying that Julian Sayin is not a better quarterback than Aaron Nolan. He is, so I think he ends up taking over the job, but I don't think it's just like locked in because he flipped to Ohio State or didn't flip, transferred to Ohio State, and they paid him all that money.
There you go. You can support us by liking the video, subscribing to the channel, or joining the website, campusforcanton.com. That's it for us tonight. We'll be back next week still covering the Big Ten. I mean, we're getting close to the time where we're actually going to have some spring games to analyze. I mean, Missouri's already played its spring game. It's ridiculous, but and we'll have to cover some of that stuff. All right. Apologies to Kirk Herbstreit. We ran out of time. We'll get them rescheduled soon. For Matt Bruening, I'm Felix Sharpe. Good night. Good luck.